Good evening. Welcome to True Talks Live. This is a live stream talk show series to provide new perspectives for project management. The show is co-sponsored by PMI Southern Maryland and PMI WDC. It was conceived and is produced by the one and only Harry Zolkauer as an entertaining and informative format to provide new perspectives to PMs and also PDUs. I'm Beth May, your MC for tonight. Please note that tonight's show is being recorded and will be available later on YouTube. Our topic for tonight is construction project management. I remember one time when I introduced myself as a project manager to someone, and they automatically assumed that I am in the construction industry. I am not. I can only guess that the construction industry adopted the formal role of project manager before other industries, or that it is a more visible role in the construction industry. Regardless, there are many aspects of project management that are common across all industries, including construction. However, in construction, you can be sure that the environment will be rich with stakeholders, governance, and complexity. That's why I'm excited to hear tonight's discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our producer, Dan Stay. Dan is the man behind the camera, so to speak, making show business magic for us. Dan will also be monitoring the YouTube chat for your questions and comments. Our True Talks host is Kendall Lott. Kendall is the CEO and president of Empowered Strategies, host of the podcast PM Point of View, and co-founder and chairman of the board for the nonprofit Project Management for Change. Kendall has hosted this show since its inception 2 years ago. His guests tonight are Bob Mayali and Anthony Mortis. Bob Mayali is the built environment product owner for PMI. He has been teaching project management for 25 years and worked for a construction company. Bob holds the PMI Construction Professional CP credential and associated micro credentials. Anthony Mortis is a chapter member with 2 years of experience in construction project management. He went to school for forensic chemistry, then became a government contractor where his activities included human resources, accounting, and project management. He now manages residential construction projects. Kendall, over to you.
Hello, Beth, and thank you for pitching in yet again here. I think this is our 17th talk show, 17th True Talks, but now we're calling it True Talks Live, right? And so thank you for making it live and being here with that. With that, I wanted to note, last time we were talking about being post-symposium when we met. Now we're post-PMDOS. So how was your PMDOS this year, your PM Day of Service?
It was great. We had that on Saturday, February 18th. It was virtual for the second time. We did it virtually in 21 and 22. It was virtual for the third time, sorry. And we had a good turnout, very low no-show rate, and got a lot of good work done for about 12 nonprofit organizations. And we announced that next year's event will be in person back at the University of Maryland in the Stamp Student Union. I'm very excited about that. I should know the date. It's Saturday, February 18th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, somewhere in there. It's the Saturday before President's Day in February 2024. So we are so grateful for all of the project managers and the nonprofits who participated in that day of service. The nonprofits were grateful for the support they received, and some of them have come back for additional support with our continuous value delivery program. And some of those PMs and nonprofits come back year after year after year. So we're looking forward to seeing them and additional new members to our community next year.
Well, hold that thought around the Stamp Student Union and the Project Management Center for Excellence. Their symposium is coming up, and we also have an event with college students that I think you'll talk about later, coming up in a couple of days. So PMs, when you hang out with Southern Maryland chapter and the DC chapter, you get to find lots of us who are volunteering to try and find ways for you to be engaged. to learn something you might actually use, to learn some stuff you're not sure if you're going to use, and always to collect a PDU. Occasionally there's calories associated. Those are the ones that usually get my attention. So thank you for the handoff there, and I appreciate it. And to reflect again on what Beth has said here at YouTube and PMs. If you got no questions, we got no answers. So do use the chat function, which is being monitored by Dan. I hear it's Dan, the man behind the scenes, who will whisper sweet directions into my ear to make sure that I get a chance to ask them. He makes a habit of that. So if you ever see me go, huh? That's because he's talking to me somehow. So get your questions in there. So we have heard tonight it's about construction, built environment. In fact, some people say we don't even notice it sometimes. And that particularly happens when the project management portions go real smooth. So tonight, construction, it's one of the parents of the PM industry, or at least as PM was defined as a practice. It's obviously one of our antecedents for many of us who are practicing now. And I'm told by those who are in the know around the PMI space, including one of our guests tonight, that this industry is the new strategic direction for PMI globally. So tonight you're sitting here on the nose cone of the rocket that is PMI and its new direction. So I've personally done a few podcasts on the topic in the past, and I got to say it's a bit beyond my comprehension. I can usually hang in there with most folks, but in the world that I work in, there's nothing as highly networked in its sequences and dependencies, issues around legal issues. So tonight we're going to make it a little bit more simple because, as you heard, we have a trainer in the space coming at us, and also someone who's a retail construction doer. So we're going to hope for some simple talk in our True Talks tonight. So let's have some True Talks and not talk falsely now, because the hour is getting late. So with that, Bob Miley, are you out there? Come on up.
I am, Kendall. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to answering all the questions.
Oh, I want you to generate us some if you can, even. That's also good. So let's lay down a little background. It's not really about your background, but I think there's a tie-in from where you've come to whence you go, which is you told me that you've been kicking around originally in the world of IT and as a PM, and then now you find yourself writing the certification course. And I don't know if I said that correctly, but you're taking us into a new place where you're consolidating the learning, I think. Give us a little context for how that could be true.
Sure. Just a little on myself. I started out as an IT project manager, got into training project managers, first for the company I worked for, which was one of the remnants of the Bell system when they broke that up many years ago. I worked for what PMI calls a registered education provider, or they called it then, where I delivered project management training seminars globally for many, Fortune 100 companies. Did that for about 18 years, and then I got back into the practitioner space, where I was able to create a few PMOs in my journeys, and then through a contact, I got involved in PMI. I was always a member of PMI, but a friend offered me a position there in the certification world, and I got involved with the construction certification. 2 years of my professional experience I did spend with AECom, which is one of the larger construction firms based in the U.S., but they're a global firm. So it's kind of like a nice melding of my practitioner experience, my construction experience, and my training experience that helped put this curriculum together.
So this curriculum, why has that become such a part of where PMI is wanting to go now? Because this is interesting, again, because I see construction, I think defense, Navy, and the construction industry were the two that kind of bred the project management discipline as we discuss it, particularly at PMI. Why is it so long for us to go back and check out our ancestors here? What's going on that's making this the thing?
I think the perception to a lot of people is that PMI got away from the construction world. Back over 50 years ago, when PMI started, construction was the ground of project managers. And then as IT developed and got into the science and art of project management, PMI followed the base and really appealed to a lot of the more technology types of projects. And a lot of the sector and a lot of the construction people felt that PMI wasn't really talking to them anymore. The 2 years I spent at AECOM, I was brought in specifically because of that. They wanted to develop an internal accreditation program because they didn't feel that PMI was speaking to them any longer. So we had a very forward-thinking vice president who himself spent 30 years in the construction industry, and he thought it's the time to bring it back to the construction world. And this is the first industry-specific certification that PMI has ever rolled out.
Well, and you said it's the first industry cert. I hadn't realized that at all. And this is a micro cert, and you call this a stacking thing. What is the opportunity for people who are engaged in just PMI? We're going to get into construction in a second, but I am intrigued by this directionality that PMI is heading. So tell me a little bit more there.
Sure. The curriculum is made up of 7 e-learning modules. Okay. We addressed the pain points that were unearthed by a group of experts, our expert panel, which was made up of a global construction audience. So the pain points that they unearthed are the basis of the curriculum. 7 courses. In addition to the 7 courses, 3 of those 7 courses have a micro-credential that one can earn following the completion of the e-learning. And then all those component pieces, the 7 e-learnings, the 3 micro-credentials, are all prerequisites to sit for the new industry-specific full certification, PMI's construction professional.
Construction professional. So this is a full certification like PMP or PGMP.
Absolutely.
What's the acronym? Give me the acronym, buddy.
It's interesting. The title of the certification is Construction Professional in Built Environment Projects. And when we first put the acronym together on that, it came out to CPBEP. And that didn't roll off the tongue. So we, met and kicked around some other ideas. So the abbreviated title officially is PMI-CP. And that kind of aligns with the way we have schedule professional and risk management professional. It's PMI-RMP, PMI-SP. So now it's PMI-CP. But the CP is short for construction professional in built environment projects. And that's a phraseology that we've picked up from industry, and it's about 50-50. Some folks have say, oh yeah, that's what we call it. It's built environment. And then some legacy companies are saying, it's still construction to us. So that's why we've incorporated both.
And the hiker in me says we're getting back to our roots, but I believe to be on message tonight, I would say we're getting back to our foundation. So I'm going to take a point for that one. That's about as far as I go in construction. Okay, so let's get into it a little bit. We'll get back to your certification a little bit later tonight, but I want to get into a little bit. In your experience from having trained people, having been in the field, set up some PMOs, God bless you, and now training in construction and also kind of leading us back into this space. Let's talk about some of the sections of the traditional knowledge area, the areas that we have to face the most. When you compare and contrast your IT background and what you've had to train in people, what are the topics that we would want to pay attention to in construction as different or the same? I'm mostly looking for difference, imagining that there is some.
The topics are the same. It's the emphasis and the granularity that's different. For those of us, I also have a PMP certification as well. And for those of us who prepared for our PMP, we know we opened up the PMBOK and, studied and memorized as much as we could. And it's a great foundational learning base for any project manager to have. In the PMI CP certification and the e-learnings, we talk about very distinct, specific tools, techniques, processes, and procedures that are unique to the construction world. I'll give you a couple examples. I know when I was studying for my PMBOK many years ago, procurement management was one of the knowledge areas. And we learned how to, solicit for a bid and, all the 6 steps or whatever it was. And that's absolutely true. In the construction world, it goes a little deeper. And in the construction certification, we talk about an area in contracts that's called claims. In a construction environment, when there's a dispute between if a subcontractor is delivering or not, or if the sponsoring organization that's hired you to deliver, if there's a dispute, it has to be resolved. And the worst thing that could happen in the construction world is to have a claim. So we talk about tools, techniques, and ways to avoid the dreaded claim, because in a multi-million-dollar project, one claim could potentially eat away the entire profit margin that a company made and expected to make over a 3, 4, 5-year period. So claims handling is such a big part of the construction world. It was never anything I had to deal with in the IT world. Not certainly to the degree of construction.
So claim handling is specific, and it sounds like this bleeds over into the element of risk. Let's talk a little bit about risk. My familiarity is with consulting projects, which typically are around organizations or around IT, which has risk. But I'm thinking there's a panoply of risk in the environment of construction, and you just hit the big one, or one big one, which is this claims area. How is risk discussed, and did it vary, and what's the emphasis there?
Risk handling, risk management it permeates everything that happens in the construction world, from the very first moment you start planning to the end delivery. In all the years that I was involved in IT, we never had any life or death risks. It was okay, you program bombed and payroll checks didn't get cut. Oh, that was important, certainly. It wasn't life or death typically. In the construction world, that's the biggest risk. It's the whole safety factor, and just everything a construction organization does on the job site in preparation of being on the job site has that overall risk management helmet on at all times.
How do you guys discuss it though when you're looking at it from a tools perspective? Is it risk registers the way we handle it, or is it embedded typically in construction project management or construction management software? Like, how does that conversation look, and how is it actually managed?
Yeah, the risk registers that we introduce to PMP candidates is maybe an Excel spreadsheet, and it has the nicely laid out columns and rows. In the construction world, the software is so elaborate and so powerful. That risk handling is mechanized as much as possible. Dashboards pop up with all the appropriate warnings, before they happen. So it's much more robust than what my experience was in the IT world and doing training and consulting for many organizations who were, IT professionals writing applications, creating systems. They didn't handle the enormity of the risk. There's just so many external factors when you're dealing with risk, as far as the local governance, the job site itself, the chemicals that are used, the construction materials, the machinery, the large number of resources. A large IT project may have 20 people on it. Construction project has hundreds of people on it. So it's just, and when you think about the old communication exercise about how many channels of communication there are in a project, I know the example he always uses is 5, and then the formula, n times n plus n minus 1 over 2. In the construction sector, that could be enormous, the number of communication channels.
Your communications walk me back to the procurement thought as I learned procurement, besides just the pro forma. And it was always like chapter 12. It was like, we'll get to it, by the end of the discussion. Don't worry about it. You'll fill out paperwork. But I remember subcontracting in some other conversations I've had around construction. The reason you have so much a scale of human bodies is there's so many subcontractors because there's specialization going on, is what I have heard. Is that what you guys end up teaching to? Is that something we would have to be aware of if we're crossing the boundary between the virtual into the physical construction area?
Yeah, one of the e-learning courses is titled Interface Management, and it's just that it's bringing all of those subcontracting entities together to work together, to hand off to each other parts of the job, and making sure that's all coordinated.
One of the areas when I had talked to someone before in construction, I was wondering from where you teach it or where you try and bring people who are interested in this field, how early into the life cycle? Meaning, one of the things that I got to when talking about risk in a different environment was the risk of the community interface. That is, the typical engineer may get started once all these certifications and licenses and permits are in place. But from a stakeholder perspective, when you're back at the chartering phase, it's suddenly that there can be local communities that I don't want this building here. I don't want this design here. I don't want this design. And so there was a lot of the risk around the socioeconomic interface of the community in which something is built. Is that something that you guys pick up on and talk about, or is that assumed already before we talk about it from a project management perspective?
No, that community involvement starts before the project even gets approved. If a commercial building is being built, those discussions have happened in the public eye for months and years before that. So it's that involvement, that communication channel, those stakeholders have to be identified, have to be placated, they have to be involved in the process, because there's always going to be an objection to something you're doing, and the best way is to just involve the community and get them to understand what you're trying to do and how you work with them to do whatever needs to be done within reason.
My sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where I'm headed with this on the tool set, my sense is that comparing projects or types of projects, construction project has something that would be relative to the rest of the world, a firm scope. In other words, we're building this thing, but what's messy is the schedule and the dependencies. That's my first comment. Just give me an eye line here. Am I tracking, or is it like, oh no, we changed the house as we're moving, we changed the building as we're moving?
Well, I'm looking for some statistics I could throw at you as far as scope changes.
Where I'm headed is this: I'm suspecting that agile management might suck in a building.
But we are, with this new curriculum, trying to show that you can apply the agile principles still to not completely, but there are ways you can incorporate the agile principles into a construction. I found my statistics. We did internal research, PMI. We surveyed 40,000 PMP.
Data, feed us.
What's that?
I said data, feed us.
Yes. So we 40,000 of our PMPs in the construction world. 70% of construction project management professionals experience scope creep always or often. And then 72% delays always or often, and 73% over budget. So
that makes me want to ask, with scope creep, I'm totally confused then, because I really see one of the things that we have faced in the environment that I'm in, and that we often talk about as professionals, talking heads to people, talking about the profession, is this idea that we need to remember that our projects are investments, that somebody's putting money in the fact that these humans get together to create a unique product or service within a deadline that is progressively elaborated, right? And so to me, a built environment is very clear. It's a $83 million building, and it has to be built, and there's rules of the road, and there's local things, that control that and constrain it, again, through the permitting process and all. So I guess my question is it seems to me that is there a sense that we're managing an investment or an asset? I mean, it's literally a capital good. That feels different
absolutely.
than an IT project to me.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't, but I mean, it feels different, I think. What do you think?
No, it's a very tangible asset that you're going to be able to point to and ride an elevator in when you're finished. So yeah, it's definitely a tangible asset. The scope creep happens, no matter how well everything's planned out. Once you start digging, you find unusual circumstances. You find, water and power lines that weren't supposed to be there. You find ancient burial grounds. You find different types of foundation than you were expecting, and now that has to be remediated and dealt with differently. So now the scope is changing on the project.
Well, I was about to ask you another question that I am going to hold because it was related to scope and schedule and cost, which we all know is sounds like earned value just a bit, but I'm going to hold that one because we got a question from our audience that is juicy.
Sure.
I believe Dan told me her name is Cheryl, and the question is compare and contrast. There you were, compare and contrast. Civil engineering, construction management, and project management. What pokes out? What's different? What's similar? How do you express that when you guys are looking at that through your 7 courses, for example?
We bring all of the, civil engineering, construction project management, architecture. We bring everyone into the label of built environment. So it's really, the phrase built environment really encompasses all of that audience. We're not specifically talking to one or the other, if that makes sense.
Right. So have you seen any variation in how you need to talk to them, though?
The product is too new that I haven't really been able to be out there, discussing it with the candidates as of yet.
Well, we will have interested people wondering how they can get into this field and from a different ways, from these different fields. And that might be my last question before we bring up our next guest, which is, what are the paths into this? PMI is building this with the assumption that people are going to flock to it or be pulled to it. What is what would be the typical or the most targeted person to be entering and wanting to learn more about this who's not already in the field? Or is it somebody who's already in the field?
Well, it's a dual path, really. It was specifically built for the people in the industry, because one of the requirements for the full-on certification is that you have 3+ years of experience in construction. Not as a construction project manager. You could be a laborer, but you need to have, been on the job site and understand that they have a language and lingo all their own. That's the reason behind the experiential component. We're also hoping to attract people from other sectors. And the nice thing about the courseware is it's 7 courses. They're all independent. You don't have to take any one in any order. You could take 1, you could take 2, you could take all 7 if you'd like. You can take the micro-credential exams to earn that or not. You could just sit through and learn the new techniques. So it's a nice PDU play for a project manager who may not be in the sector, who is looking to just learn a little bit about it and just, I wonder how that, contract and risk, how that is handled and how that's different in the construction world. So you can take that e-learning, get those PDUs in something that's, maybe something different than you've heard before. And hopefully that way we'll be able to attract some folks into the sector.
That has really made me want to look more into it myself. There's something very real and tangible about it. As you said, it feels more, I think maybe risky is the thing. I feel like there would be more of a sense of completion in it. So with that, I'm going to bring up somebody who can talk to us real, because he's doing it all the time. We'll bring out our practitioner for the evening here. We have Anthony Mortis. Anthony, are you out there?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Showing up here tonight, ready to tell us what it's like to actually be in the field doing the work here. So you literally live by your role in PMing construction. So welcome. So I have a question for you, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
What did you just hear that sounded true? You're like, absolutely, spot on.
A lot of stuff, especially the safety risks. We do a lot of training, OSHA certified training, to make sure we assess risk on job sites. So if I could take one thing out of the previous conversation, safety is a big thing for us.
So looking at it from a risk perspective.
Correct. Right. Like you said, it can be life and death. There's all types of hazards on a job site. People are working at crazy heights. For me, residential, you're digging foundations and there's cave-in risks. So there's a lot of safety risks involved.
Wow. How big is a team that you typically run? When you're going, are you labeled a project manager or a construction manager? Let me
So
ask
I'm
that
labeled a
first.
construction manager. I'm
Okay.
labeled a
How
construction
big,
manager.
how big is the typical team for you?
So my immediate team of other construction managers is it's only three of us on a residential job site. But in terms of all the trades that we manage, I mean, kind of like Bob said, there can be about 50 to 100 depending on the size of the project.
How big are your projects typically? Are we talking about building a house? Are you building whole suburbs or communities, or what's happening here? Neighborhoods?
Whole community. So that gated community you come home to, it started from ground zero at some point, and that's what our company does. We build whole communities.
Well, then if I'm in a gated community, we're missing a gate. I need to get somebody out here because that's not what I live in. But I hear what you're talking about. So
Yeah,
you're laying all that out. So you are a PMP though, right? So you started out with that certification and training, correct?
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So there you were taking the test, having your PMP, being very happy with that. Then you went into construction. What did you
Yeah.
find that you studied that you're like, no, that's not how it works at all? Tell us the truth now. What are we learning that we don't need, at least in the environment you're in?
I mean, me personally, all the procurement of the contractors on the job site and just all the approval before you can start building on the land. As a construction manager in my position, we don't see any of that stuff. Not
I
to say that
see.
it's not important for the company, but us personally, we don't get involved with any of that.
So I want to ask you the same question that we heard from Cheryl. Do you observe a difference between people that you're engaged with from a civil engineering versus construction management or construction engineering versus your project management? Like, are you seeing any variation in there yourself from a viewpoint?
Um, well, if we're
You
talking
run
about
across civil engineers?
architectural,
Yeah,
yeah, if
architecture.
we're talking about architectural compared to actual construction managers, the architects, I mean, they provide all the plans that we build from. So if those plans aren't spot on, that just creates issues and risks down the line. So we never specifically engage with them, like have conversations with them. Again, that's on a higher level than what we are, but yeah, all those plans come straight from them. They have to be almost pretty much perfect, every inch on that plan for everything to work properly.
I'm struck by a couple of things that I imagine to be true. So do correct me here. I'm thinking about
Okay.
a construction site and construction differently than how I have to show up as a PM or when I show up managing PMs even. I'm thinking that you are subject to a lot more external forces, not just external
Mhm.
stakeholders, but external forces. To be specific, weather, I'm thinking must matter, I would
Yep.
imagine. And the
Yep.
second one is around, you must have tremendous supply readiness. I don't know if it's supply chain management, but supply readiness.
Mhm.
Uh, isn't the throughput really a big deal? I mean, we're not trying to like store materials on site, I would imagine generally, right? That's probably not
Right.
money well. So can you talk to us about like, I don't have a supply problem. I have a labor supply problem, but I don't have a material supply problem. How does that play out in
Right.
the environment in terms of schedule and all?
So yeah, all of our trades, they typically provide their own material when it's their day for installation. Uh,
Yeah.
as you said, there can be supply chain issues. I mean, I came in during the middle of COVID, so
Oh,
at that point in time, I mean, there was a lumber shortage, there was appliance delays, all types of supply chain issues involved with our trades. But if the site is big enough, we normally have at least a container. So if they do have extra material that they don't use when they finish a house, we have that extra material stored and we can use it on the next house. Because we're production builders, most of our options are pretty standard throughout all the houses. So
do you have a sense? One of the things you may have heard me talking with Bob about, we wrestle a lot with making sure project managers understand that they are managing someone else's money ultimately, right? It's an investment
mhm,
because there's money
yeah.
going in that's supposed to produce something that is more valuable than all the labor and the materials added together. How does that weigh
Mhm.
on you yourself? How do you reflect on your building an asset? And how does that work when you're talking to your team? How do you feel about that yourself?
I mean, it makes us take a lot of pride in it because, you are dealing with somebody's livelihood. You don't know what kind of situation they could be in. They bought a home that they want to be happy with for a long time. So we take a lot of pride in making sure we deliver, the best possible product for them and on time because, some people have leases that are ending and they live with their parents or relatives for a couple months while they're waiting for the house to get done. Some people are locked into certain interest rates, when they locked in their contract, that you want to be able to hit their deadline so they don't get stuck with a higher interest rate, or how rates have changed, these past few months even. Um, so yeah, we take a lot of pride in it because again, this is a house that people want to be proud of, that they want to live in, show off to their friends, and just we want to make it the best decision they made, buying a
I
house.
I appreciate that in what you just said. There's a human on the other side of this. There are humans that go into that house and they've got their own schedules that they're blending in, as you said, with their own leases, their own interest rates, their own needs with their families. That's
Hmm.
a certain human touch to it, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
that's that's pretty impressive. I like that, the sense of pride. I think that's something that we may often miss that comes near the end of the project, probably. I want to ask you about the life cycle of the project. We got a question from the chat related to this. From the perspective that you're in construction management, when do you get on site? Are you on site at groundbreaking right from the beginning? How early in the process are you in it yourself? And when do you release it? When are you done?
So there's a long process once they acquire the land. So they have to, of course, prep all the land, know where the roads are going, get all the utilities underground that are going to supply the whole neighborhood. So that can take years to begin with. And then, depending on the size of the community. And then once our first thing we do is build a model house, maybe a couple model houses that people can tour and kind of get an idea of what the different house types that we offer for that community. But yeah, as soon as they're ready to roll out with the models, we're there day one, every day, feet on the ground, just getting it built and keeping the job site rolling.
What's the throughput you have? You said you've been doing this for 2 years. How many houses have you thrown together here? How many houses have you built with pride? Is that like 20?
um,
Or is it like 200? Or is it like, no, 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 no. It takes years. It's 12 houses. Like, where are we at on size here? Or volume,
no, no,
should
no.
we say?
So in my 2 years, I mean, we had a pretty fast pace last year where we probably did about 70 in a year. Um, just deliver 70 homes throughout that year. And that's pretty typical. Sometimes you deliver a few more, sometimes you deliver a few less. It just all depends when people are locking in contracts. But yeah, a typical year you might do about 60 to 70.
What's the biggest thing you've learned in the 2 years you've been working in this environment this way? Thinking about your training, thinking about how you got into it. Like, what's the biggest thing that you've been able to learn? Thing we want to watch out for that we might want to learn too if we were involved in that?
I mean, communication is the biggest thing that you need to have for this industry.
Wow,
Just
I hadn't expected that. Tell
yeah.
me more.
Well, like I said, we have a whole bunch of different trades. There's a trade for every aspect of the house. You got plumbers, you got electricians, you got HVAC guys, you have framers, trim guys. Just it doesn't stop. So you have to make sure that you're communicating with them on a daily basis, letting them know where the house is at. Is it going to be ready for them? Because of course, if one trade is delayed, then you're delaying everybody behind them. So uh, you got to really keep an eye on the houses, make sure people are doing what they need to do, and I mean communication. I mean, I always tell people we're like glorified babysitters, man. We just gotta stay on top of everybody and make sure they're doing their job the right way. So
It's funny you say that. I know what you mean. I mean, it's a sense of like trying to keep everybody together. I had a sense recently in some various environments I'm in that I'm a PM, which means professional mommy. I'm like, why did you
yeah,
leave that
exactly.
behind? Why aren't you picking that up? What do you mean you didn't show up on time? What do you mean you didn't tell your sister? It's like, ah, It's because it's
Yeah.
human relationship, huh? So I was thinking
Yeah.
of you guys worried about things falling or collapsing, but it sounds like communication is a big deal. I want to bring Bob back in here to bring our academic and training exposure to our reality exposure. By the way, while we bring Bob up, go ahead, Bob. I do have to know, Anthony. Do you do any of the construction yourself? Have you hit your thumb with a hammer yet?
Very rarely I pick up a tool, unless we're at a crazy deadline and I just can't get anybody in the house. Then maybe I'll swing a hammer here and there. But no, we typically don't use tools or aren't swinging the tools. We make sure everybody else has a tool in their hand. So
Yeah, but Bob, I want that in your curriculum, man, which is PM's got to fill in the gaps when no one else is there. You got to be ready to step in at some level anyway, with whatever you're able to be
Absolutely.
competent to. Hey, so I'm intrigued by the earned value concept here, because earned value was the miserable thing we all had to go and learn how to do. I say miserable. I shouldn't have said that. It was miserable. So the earned value aspect of the world, it seems to me, in a space where money and time are so tightly tied, and sequencing dependencies, I think you said, right? The trades dependent on each other seem so important. It seems to me that earned value and that calculation and that management of that would be so important. I would like to know if that's actually true. So let's start, Bob. Do you teach it? Is it different in your mind? And then Anthony, you're going to tell us if you experience it at all. Ready, set, go.
Okay, I'm interested to hear Anthony's answer on this from a house building perspective. In the 20 plus years that I taught and consulted and helped people prepare for their PMP exam, and all the clients I dealt with in the IT world, not one did I ever come across that used earned value for anything. When I worked at AECOM, however, I found out that that was the single most important metric they had. And they lived and died by their earned value calculation. It was the most important thing they had. And that floored me because I had never encountered it. I knew the calculation, I knew what it represented, I knew what it meant, but it was never used in my experience in IT projects. In major construction projects, it was. So it sounds Anthony's like in that middle ground with it's not an office building, but I'm curious to hear his answer on this.
yeah, I mean, earned value. I haven't seen that equation in a long time. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
but yeah,
Well,
of
that's the
course. I
answer. You're
mean,
not running across it. You're not running across the schedule performance index or cost performance index kind of stuff.
right. So I mean, of course, our bosses and our supervisors and the higher ups, they make sure we stay within certain budgets. And then if we're spending too much money on a certain house or too much money on the project as a whole, we hear about it for sure.
Hmm.
Because of course they're probably up there doing all the calculations and seeing if you know this is a good business decision. So yeah, I would say it's probably the most important thing in construction, especially when they invest their money in the community that they're taking a risk on to see if it works.
What in terms of the structure that you're in, Anthony? Who do you report to? What is like the role above you that is the type of role you're reporting to and getting this information from?
So my company is Brookfield Residential. They're actually on a bigger scale. They're actually called Brookfield Asset Management, and they're all over the world in all types of different spaces. My direct boss, he's the area manager. He's pretty much the liaison between the construction managers on the ground and people in corporate, just kind of keeping them in the know, telling them the trends that are happening, to help them make better informed decisions.
You mentioned that you would get an alert if one of the houses was beginning to cost too much, like I guess your cost was bumpy or lumpy in there. And the reason I'm
Mhm.
asking that is because Bob mentioned that the internal survey they did of 40,000 construction managers, where 70% of them, I think the number was 70%, end up with
Yeah.
changes in scope, and some 72% end up with the cost schedule budget problem. Do you experience that scope change, Anthony, or how do you mitigate it? The change of what
So
you're building,
we're
essentially.
right. So we're considered production builders. So we're not doing custom homes where
Right.
you can decide last minute, hey, I don't want a granite countertop. I want a quartz countertop. Now, once they've signed a contract, their prices are locked in. That's pretty much what you get. Every now and then, if there's, again, supply chain issues, we might offer you an alternative. But once that contract is locked in, they pretty much tell us, hey, build from the plans, build from the options they selected. And at a certain point, there's a cutoff where they can't make any changes. And, if they decide they want to put in a different backsplash, they have to wait till they settle on the house and do some DIY.
So before I take this back to Bob, I want to ask you then, what's the biggest disruption that you face, given that it sounds beautiful. You have your plans, you have your budget, and it's all about communication. So I guess it always works really smoothly, or not. What's the biggest disruption you typically face, Anthony, trying to get to the end?
Well, a lot of things can happen. Trades can get sloppy and, break a window here, damage trim there. So there's always a situation where if we need to replace a cabinet door or something like that that got damaged, that's extra money. The company is going to say, hey, when we installed it, it was good. And, 2 weeks later, it's not. So here's a PO, as they call it, where they invoice us and we have to pretty much add to the budget for that specific house.
Is it hard for you to forecast? Chris asked from the chat, and I think this is an important one. Is it hard for you to forecast the finished product, what it will be like, and when it is date certain finished? Does that end up being hard for you in the kind of production environment you're in, Anthony?
I would say when the house is first getting foundations done and framing, it's a little hard to forecast because weather is very weather dependent. But once you have a roof on there and windows, unless your trades are having delays on materials, you pretty much know what the timeline should be to get everything wrapped up from that point.
Interesting. So, Bob, I want to come over to you then with this. It sounds like part of what you're teaching is inclusive of a larger scope of built environment. In fact, built environment, just not construction. So we're talking about possibly office buildings, I imagine commercial, and possibly even, I wanted to ask, are we talking about monuments, art installations? Is it something besides commercial building and residential buildings?
Yeah, the built environment, it can be anything from a nuclear power plant to a stadium to a pier renovation and replacement in harbors, highway overpasses, highway expansions, anything along those lines.
So the level of and there's where our civil engineering just kicked in when you started talking about that. We talked about highway expansions and ramps and things like that. So I think there is going to be a difference there. It sounds like the level of complexity that you're looking at from the package that you want to train to, and certainly what AECOM would be bigger than the production environment, which takes us back to something we see in project management all the time. The question is how much is standard and repeatable? Anthony, it sounds like you're in a fairly repeatable, relative to other things, a repeatable process. Like the trades know what they should be doing. You have a model. You literally have plans and a model. Whereas it sounds like where you're teaching to, Bob, is that may not be always the case. It may not be. There's only so many nuclear power plants getting built, right? So,
right.
I'm understanding there's a
we're not teaching them how to build it. We're teaching them how to manage the build. So it's still project management. It's still, so we're not, replacing the engineering schools, but we're giving them the tools to manage regardless of the end deliverable, whether it's a building, whether it's a highway, whether it's a stadium.
That's what's interesting to me. Anthony is reflecting that he's really managing the trades in a sense. When you just made that reference, Bob, it's making me think that in some of the complex environments, we may be managing completely different professions and trades, as well as, you're probably dealing with architects and lawyers and all sorts of stuff then. Is what your training is trying to get at as a PM? Is that the scope that the PMs in the construction environment or built environment are facing? How broad is the stakeholder?
The stakeholder pool is very broad, whether internal or external. You said lawyers, there's, every subcontractor you're dealing with has their own legal department that you have to come to agreement with. And, Anthony mentioned working with plumbers, carpenters, and electricians on the same site, they tend not to like each other very much. So you
Oh.
have to deal with that issue as well. Because they
Is it
will
conflict?
blame the other guy if something goes wrong.
So, Anthony, is conflict management part of your world?
Oh my goodness, it's all the time. They have no regard for the work of somebody else sometimes when they get in that house. So if a pipe is in the way, they'll just cut it, and we might not even find it till 2 days later. Like, what happened here? So yeah, he's spot on.
Well, so how do you handle conflict management, Bob? Do you guys teach a module on that? I mean, it's more, I mean, I guess it falls in communication or stakeholder management, but this is a little more explicit.
It's not specific to conflict management. No, it's a theme that runs throughout the courses from a contract and risk perspective. Conflicts may arise from a communication perspective, where conflicts may arise and things like that. But it's all around trying to be as clear and complete as you possibly can before the work starts, and then just monitoring the work as it's getting done.
So kind of asking a combo question here to the two of you. Take it up through Bob, though. So you have your PMP, Anthony, and you're working on site. Bob, you're teaching a course for PMI, taking, a leadership role in that, as I understood, has to have people with 3 years of experience. Was that in construction? As a first question, just, is it 3 years in construction or 3 years anywhere?
Well, for the CP certification, in addition to the courseware and the micro credentials, you do need the 3 years experience. But short of that, if you are transitioning or attempting a transition into the construction industry, you can, and it's going to take you a while to get your feet wet and to get the courses completed and the micro credentials earned. You don't need the experience to earn the micro credentials. You don't need the experience to take the courses. It's just that final comprehensive exam that you do. So having the micro credentials is a nice little badge of honor that is, maybe it's in some topic that you're not fluent in now, and that gives you a little more insight. And earning the micro credentials along with your own project management experience might get you that first project management gig in the construction world.
So Anthony here has his PMP, does not have this new credential just yet, has a couple years of actual experience. Here's what I'd like to hear. Bob, sell Anthony on your product. Tell this
Anthony,
man why he needs this next, or why he needs to tell his peer, why he's got to get somebody else to do it.
It's the first time PMI is focusing a certification aimed at a specific sector. It's your chance to get in on the ground floor with this. There's not a lot of construction professionals in our certification world just yet. We just opened the exam went live in the beginning of February, so there's only been a handful of people who've passed the exam. It's tough. It's a comprehensive exam. It's every bit as comprehensive and difficult as the PMP exam, but once you earn it, you have it, and you'll be able to proudly display that on your LinkedIn profile. It might be that last filter of hiring managers, where they have the stack of resumes for PMPs and the non-PMPs, so forget the non-PMPs. And now when they're looking at the PMPs, there's only going to be one or two who have this additional certification specific to the construction world. So that might be the thing that puts you over the top.
I like it.
And you'll learn.
I hear you selling it on the what's in it for me type of outcome. Let's talk about what you're going to learn, though. What would actually expand the depth and breadth of someone who has studied in project management and is also not swinging a hammer, but negotiating with all the people who are, as it were? What is this additional level? I mean, unless we're saying go build a nuclear power plant or manage the people who do.
It's the tools and tech. It's very, very tactical to the very specific tools, techniques, and processes and procedures that are used, or at least should be used, in the construction world. And like, there's a module on technology and innovation, and it talks about BIM, building BIM, use of drones, use of wearables, getting technology implemented in construction to reduce risk. If you don't have to send someone, onto a roof to check out a condition, and you can send up a drone that'll project it down to your tablet, it's a safer way to go, and it's recorded. So things like that are talked about and encouraged throughout the courseware.
You just walked us into a new space, and then Anthony, I'm going to have one last question for you. So Bob, with that, you just walked me to what is the future going to be about for construction, and how does that have bearing on someone like Anthony, who again is trained and doing? What are we anticipating? I just heard some drones and technology. What's actually fundamentally changing in the built environment and the management of the built environment as we look forward? I'm glad you took us back to the foundations, but where's it going?
Who's that, for me or Anthony?
Oh, that's for you.
Okay,
Bob.
Just using new materials, new ways of doing things. You made reference earlier about materials, and you don't have them on site. Well, they're somewhere. And if you've pre-ordered them, you're storing them somewhere, and you have to manage them, and you have to manage the disposition of the waste and all the things that you may not consider or feel that it's part of the project manager's job on the construction site, but it is. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about. It really is very specific and tactical to the industry.
Well, back over to you, Anthony. I wanted to ask this for you. I don't know if you need this PMI CP, but it sounds like it's an interesting goal. You start walking into innovation and bigger projects and more complexity is what I'm hearing. But we did have a question, an excellent question from the chat here, which is, when you took your construction job, what was the relevance of the PMP? Was it a nice to have? Did you learn was the cert relevant, or was the learning relevant, or were neither particularly spot on relevant? How do you feel it helped you with your job?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, I didn't have any construction experience prior to joining the company, so it was more so like a resume booster. Let them know, hey, I went through this rigorous training. These credentials are prestigious to a lot of companies and people, and it was just something to kind of boost my resume, get my foot in the door, and let them know I was serious about really being involved in construction from a project management standpoint.
Oh, I love it. Market signaling. That's what we want to hear in PMI, and that's what we want to hear in our discipline generally. And presumably, I'm hoping you might have learned something you could use in it, but it sounds like there's much more to go. But I'm glad we can talk about it in terms of getting employment and moving forward. I want to thank you for coming in tonight. Bob, you've got something here for everyone to sell and buy, or rather you're selling and they would need to buy it from us. Where do they connect on this? Just go on to PMI.org. What's the way to get into play here?
PMI.org. Go to the certifications page, a list of all the certifications, and or just PMI.org/certifications/construction. That'll be the landing page for the construction.
Are there REPs or whatever they're called now, ATPs in this now, or is it all through PMI and online?
It was designed as e-learning only, and when we were out there trying to sell it, the second thing we heard from people is, we need this in instructor-led training too. So we're also in the process of developing instructor-led training, getting the ATPs up to speed on delivering it, and look for that to happen in the second half of the year.
Well, excellent. It feels very tactile. I almost want to see a capstone project in this, because I got to tell you, I'm pretty good at book learning, or I used to be anyway, before all the gray happened. Pretty good at book learning, and you do not want me swinging a hammer or talking to people who swing hammers, because I won't get it. I just won't get it. So congratulations on your success, Anthony, and how you've been able to move forward into it. And also, Bob, on kind of taking us to another place on behalf of PMI and back to our foundations, as we said. So we've constructed a conversation here around this. And I want to thank both of you here tonight. And I'm going to bring Beth back up to take us out. I don't hear you, Beth.
My bad. I was on mute. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. I particularly enjoyed, and I think Kendall did too, when Anthony said communication, 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 because that has always been my mantra for project management. And I always precede it by saying, well, you know how in real estate it's location, location, location. And so here we're talking about building houses, but managing the building of the houses. Communication, communication, communication. So I'm with you on that, Anthony. Really enjoyed this discussion tonight. Before we wrap up, I have a few announcements. The next True Talks with Project Managers will be in May. The tentative date is May 11th. Watch the PMI Southern Maryland site, if not also the WDC site, for the details, confirmation, and hopefully we'll have some social media alerts in advance next time. And there is an event next week, next Wednesday, called I actually can't see you're not showing the slide yet. You can show the slide now. Jumpstart with University PM Talks. It's called University Project Management Talk Series. Next Wednesday at 7 p.m. You can find the information on the PMI Southern Maryland. No, sorry, that's the PMI WDC site. And there will be four talks, brief, I think 20-minute talks from project managers, and aimed directly toward the students at the Project Management Center for Excellence. Hosted by the Project Management Center for Excellence at the University of Maryland. They have a club called Next Gen for the grad students there, and this is one of that club's activities. So some more senior level PMs will be there to network with the students, and you may be interested in participating in that. If you want to know more about other PMI activities, please check the PMI WDC and PMI Southern Maryland websites. In addition, the University of Maryland Project Management Symposium is 2 days, April 20th and April 21st. So that's exactly 1 month away. They have 5 tracks and 50 sessions. It is recorded, so if you register, you can attend as many as you can, and then you can watch the rest on demand and get lots of PDUs and lots of good information. And that website is on the screen right now. That's pmsymposium.umd.edu. And finally, the Project Management Day of Service next year for your long-range planning is on February 17th, 2024, and we will be announcing it on social media and on our website on November 2nd. You will find out when and how to register for that, because November 2nd is the International Project Management Day. So that's when we announce how to register for the next Project Management Day of Service in the DC region. I think those are all the announcements we had for tonight. So I'm going to, there was one more announcement. Don't forget to submit your PDU claim. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.